At 5 in the morning, steam rising from his battered food cart like incense from a prayer. Christian Martinez never expected his first customer to be the man who had systematically destroyed his life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thompson stepped out of his black Mercedes, designer shoes clicking against wet asphalt, completely unaware that the exhausted single father serving breakfast burritos from a cart named Hope's Kitchen was the same chef whose award-winning restaurant he had crushed 18 months earlier. Christian Martinez had once owned the most celebrated restaurant in downtown Denver. Corazón served authentic Mexican fusion cuisine that food critics called revolutionary, blending his grandmother's traditional recipes with techniques he'd learned at culinary school. The restaurant occupied a converted warehouse in the arts district, its exposed brick walls adorned with murals painted by local artists who ate there for free in exchange for their work. Tables were always full, reservations booked weeks in advance, and Christian employed 32 people who felt more like family than staff. His 7-year-old daughter Sofia would do her homework at table 12 every afternoon after school, the entire kitchen staff helping her with math problems between dinner prep. She knew every server's name, every cook's story, and could fold napkins faster than anyone except her father. Christian's wife Maria had died from complications during Sofia's birth, leaving him to raise their daughter while building his dream restaurant. The grief nearly destroyed him, but Sofia's laughter pulled him back from the edge, and Corazón became his love letter to both the daughter who saved him and the wife he'd lost. The restaurant wasn't just successful financially, it was a cornerstone of the community. Christian sponsored 3 youth soccer teams, hosted fundraisers for local schools, and never turned away hungry people who couldn't pay. Every Thanksgiving, Corazón served free meals to anyone who needed them, transforming the dining room into a celebration of gratitude that brought together families, homeless individuals, immigrants, and longtime residents. Local news stations featured the tradition annually, calling it the heart of Denver spirit. Thompson's empire, Pacific Dining Corporation, had been quietly acquiring properties throughout the arts district for 2 years. His strategy was surgical and ruthless, identifying successful independent establishments, then systematically undermining them through a combination of regulatory pressure, supplier manipulation, and strategic property acquisition. His goal was to replace authentic local businesses with sanitized chain restaurants that maximized profit margins while minimizing character and community connection. Christian first noticed problems when his primary food distributor, Rocky Mountain Fresh, suddenly tripled their prices overnight. Then his landlord, who had been friendly for 6 years, began citing obscure lease violations that required expensive corrections. The health department arrived for surprise inspections weekly, each visit finding increasingly nitpicky violations that resulted in fines and mandatory closures for remediation. Christian spent his savings fighting each citation, hiring lawyers and contractors to address problems that seemed to multiply faster than he could solve them. The final blow came on a busy Saturday evening in March. 2 health inspectors arrived during the dinner rush, claiming they'd received anonymous reports of food poisoning. They shut down the kitchen immediately, confiscating all food inventory and demanding comprehensive testing that would take weeks to complete. The closure notice posted on the front door was like a death certificate for everything Christian had built. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. While Corazón sat empty, hemorrhaging money with each passing day, Pacific Dining Corporation made an offer to purchase the lease at 60 cents on the dollar. Thompson himself delivered the proposal, his silver hair perfectly styled, his handmade Italian suit worth more than most people's cars. He toured the empty dining room with the detached interest of a vulture examining roadkill, commenting on the restaurant's potential while systematically cataloging its current vulnerabilities. Christian refused the offer, determined to reopen once the health department cleared them. He borrowed against his house, maxed out credit cards, and sold everything valuable he owned, including Maria's engagement ring and his grandmother's antique piano. But the health department's investigation stretched on indefinitely, each week bringing new requirements and additional costs. Anonymous complaints continued flooding their offices, ensuring Corazón remained closed while Christian's resources dwindled to nothing. 4 months later, facing bankruptcy and foreclosure, Christian had no choice but to accept Pacific Dining's revised offer of 40 cents on the dollar. He signed the papers in Marcus Thompson's glass-walled office, 40 floors above the city, watching his former restaurant being gutted through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Within weeks, Corazón was transformed into another generic Pacific Grill location, its murals painted over in corporate beige, its soul extracted and replaced with laminated menus and plastic plants. The 32 employees Christian had considered family were scattered to minimum wage positions throughout the city. Most couldn't find work that paid enough to survive. 3 moved away entirely. His sous chef Roberto, who had worked beside him for 8 years, took a job washing dishes at a hotel for half his previous salary. The servers who had known regular customers' names and favorite dishes were replaced by teenagers reading scripts about daily specials they'd never tasted. Christian lost his house 6 months after signing away his restaurant. He and Sofia moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a complex where sirens wailed nightly and the playground equipment was held together with duct tape and prayers. Sofia had to change schools, leaving behind friends and teachers who knew her story, entering an overwhelmed public school system where she became just another face in crowded classrooms. She stopped talking about wanting to be a chef like her daddy, stopped asking when they could reopen the restaurant, stopped believing in dreams that seemed too expensive for their new reality. The food cart idea came from desperation, not inspiration. Christian found the beaten-up mobile kitchen on Craigslist for $800, its previous owner a retired contractor who'd used it for job sites before his arthritis made climbing in and out impossible. The cart was a disaster. Rust ate through the corners like cancer, the propane system leaked, and the refrigeration unit wheezed like an old man climbing stairs. But it was mobile, it was his, and most importantly, it was hope disguised as scrap metal. Christian spent 3 weeks in the parking lot behind their apartment complex, rebuilding the cart with his bare hands and whatever tools he could borrow from neighbors. Sofia sat on a milk crate beside him every afternoon, handing him screws and washers while practicing multiplication tables. She'd grown quieter since losing their home, her natural chatter replaced by careful observation of her father's struggle. The 8-year-old had learned to count money with frightening precision, separating bills by denomination and calculating how many breakfast burritos they'd need to pay rent. The cart's transformation became a neighborhood project. Miss Rodriguez from apartment 4B contributed a stack of mismatched plates she'd been saving for a garage sale. Tommy Chin, the teenage son of the building manager, helped Christian install LED lights he'd salvaged from an electronics store dumpster. Even old Mr. Washington, the Vietnam veteran who usually kept to himself, emerged from his apartment with a commercial-grade coffee machine he'd somehow acquired during his mysterious past. Christian painted the cart himself, choosing bright yellow and red colors that reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen in Guadalajara. He hand-lettered Hope's Kitchen across the side in script that took him 17 attempts to perfect, each letter a small act of faith in a future that seemed increasingly uncertain. Inside the cart, he installed hooks for his grandmother's cast-iron pans, the only valuable items he'd refused to sell. These pans had fed his family for 3 generations, and Christian believed they carried some kind of blessing in their seasoned surfaces. The permit process nearly broke him before he started. City bureaucrats shuffled him between departments for 6 weeks, each office requiring different forms, different fees, different inspections. The food handler's license cost $200 he didn't have. The business permit required proof of insurance he couldn't afford. The health department demanded modifications to the cart that would cost another $1,000. Christian felt like Sisyphus, pushing a boulder up a mountain only to watch it roll back down each time he thought he'd made progress. Jennifer Walsh saved him from complete defeat. The city permit coordinator was a single mother herself, working 2 jobs to support her own teenage daughter. She'd noticed Christian returning week after week, always polite despite the endless setbacks, always accompanied by Sofia, who did homework in the waiting area. Jennifer began staying late to help him navigate the bureaucratic maze, finding loopholes and exemptions that could reduce costs. She even connected him with an inspector friend who agreed to waive certain fees in exchange for catering his daughter's quinceañera. The cart's first location was outside Riverside Elementary, where Sofia attended school. Christian positioned himself strategically to catch the morning rush of teachers and school staff who needed quick breakfast options. His menu was simple but authentic. Breakfast burritos stuffed with scrambled eggs, chorizo, and potatoes that reminded teachers of childhood vacations in Mexico. Fresh fruit cups with lime and chili powder that disappeared faster than he could prepare them. Coffee strong enough to wake the dead, served with a smile that cost nothing but meant everything. Word spread through social media with surprising speed. Teachers posted Instagram photos of their breakfast burritos, tagging friends and colleagues. Parent volunteers shared videos of Christian preparing food with obvious love and skill, his hands moving with the confidence of someone who understood that cooking was both art and necessity. Within 2 weeks, a line formed before dawn, customers arriving in scrubs, business suits, and paint-splattered overalls. Christian learned their names, remembered their orders, and asked about their families with genuine interest. Sofia became the cart's unofficial mascot and quality control manager. She arrived at 5:30 each morning, checking that napkin dispensers were full and condiment containers properly arranged. Customers adored her serious demeanor and occasional jokes, tipping extra when she complimented their outfit choices or remembered their coffee preferences. She counted change with mathematical precision and offered restaurant-quality customer service that impressed adults accustomed to surly fast food workers. The work was backbreaking. Christian woke at 4 each morning to prep ingredients, his body protesting after years of restaurant management rather than physical labor. His hands, once soft from office work and occasional cooking demonstrations, developed calluses and burns from constant contact with hot surfaces. His back ached from hunching over the small prep space, and his feet swelled from standing on concrete for 12 hours daily. But customers kept coming, drawn by food that tasted like love and memories rather than corporate efficiency. Within 3 months, Christian had saved enough to upgrade the cart's equipment and expand the menu. He added lunch options like barbacoa tacos and pozole verde that sold out daily. Regular customers began arriving with friends, creating a lunch rush that stretched from 11 until 2. Christian hired his first employee, Carlos Mendez, a teenager whose mother cleaned offices downtown. Carlos worked afternoons after school, learning food preparation while earning money for college applications. The success felt fragile, like a soap bubble that could burst with the slightest pressure. Christian deposited cash daily, watching his bank account grow from negative numbers to small positive balances that represented security he hadn't felt since losing Corazón. He and Sofia moved from their cramped apartment to a modest 2-bedroom duplex with a small backyard where she could plant tomatoes and read books under the apple tree. The house wasn't much, but it was theirs, and Sofia's bedroom had windows that let in morning sunlight. Christian began dreaming carefully. Maybe he could buy a second cart, hire more employees, eventually open another restaurant. This time he'd be smarter about contracts, more careful about partnerships, more aware of the predators who circled successful small businesses like sharks sensing blood. He researched legal protections, studied franchise models, and consulted with other food truck owners who'd successfully expanded their operations. But on a cold Thursday morning in October, as Christian prepared for what would become the most important day of his life, he had no idea that Thompson's morning routine would intersect with his own. The CEO of Pacific Dining Corporation had recently moved to a penthouse apartment 6 blocks from Christian's cart location, and his new driver had suggested they try the highly rated breakfast burrito vendor that employees throughout the downtown area couldn't stop discussing on social media platforms. Thompson had been ordering from Hope's Kitchen for 3 weeks before recognition dawned like a slow sunrise. The food was exceptional, prepared by hands that moved with professional precision despite the humble surroundings. The breakfast burrito contained layers of flavor that reminded him of expensive restaurants, not street cart fare. Something about the chef's technique nagged at his memory: the way he folded eggs with restaurant-quality finesse,
the particular spice blend that seemed familiar yet elusive. The revelation struck him on a Wednesday morning, when Christian accidentally dropped his wallet while making change. Driver's licenses scattered across the cart's metal counter, and Marcus glimpsed the name Christian Martinez printed in official font. The puzzle pieces assembled themselves with horrifying clarity. This was the chef from Corazón, the restaurant Marcus had systematically destroyed through Pacific Dining Corporation's acquisition strategy. The man now serving him breakfast from a battered cart was the same person whose life he had methodically dismantled 18 months earlier. Marcus felt something unexpected twist in his stomach, an emotion he hadn't experienced since building his corporate empire. Guilt was an inconvenient feeling for someone whose success depended on crushing competition without sentiment or hesitation. He'd destroyed dozens of independent restaurants using the same playbook he'd deployed against Corazón, viewing them as obstacles to market dominance rather than communities built by real people with families and dreams. But seeing Christian's calloused hands preparing food with obvious pride while wearing secondhand clothes made the human cost suddenly devastatingly real. Christian remained oblivious to his customer's true identity. Marcus paid with cash, never using credit cards that would reveal his name, and his driver waited in the Mercedes several blocks away to avoid drawing attention. To Christian, he was simply another businessman who appreciated authentic food and paid without complaint. The irony was suffocating. The very man whose empire Christian had unknowingly
fed was being nourished by the chef he had systematically ruined. Pacific Dining Corporation's board meeting that Thursday focused on expanding their Denver operations. Marcus sat at the head of a polished conference table worth more than most people's annual salaries, listening to presentations about market penetration and profit optimization. The Arts District had been completely transformed according to their strategic vision. Authentic restaurants replaced by branded establishments that served consistent, profitable mediocrity. Property values had increased dramatically, pushing out local artists, musicians, and small business owners who had created the neighborhood's original character. Regional Manager Bradley Chen presented quarterly reports with obvious satisfaction. The Corazón location was performing exceptionally well, generating 47% higher profits than projected. The sanitized Pacific Grill menu appealed to office workers seeking quick, predictable meals without the complications of ethnic flavors or unfamiliar ingredients. Focus groups praised the restaurant's cleanliness and efficiency, though they noted the absence of personality that had characterized the previous establishment. Marcus found himself defending decisions he'd made automatically months earlier. When Bradley suggested acquiring more properties in the University District using their proven strategy of regulatory pressure and supplier manipulation, Marcus hesitated for the first time in his corporate career. These weren't just businesses, he realized with uncomfortable clarity. They were dreams built by people like Christian who had sacrificed everything to create something meaningful. The ethical crisis deepened when Marcus researched Christian's background more thoroughly. His assistant compiled a comprehensive report detailing the chef's history, education, and community involvement. Christian had graduated from culinary school with honors, worked at prestigious restaurants in Chicago and San Francisco, and returned to Denver specifically to open a restaurant that would honor his heritage while serving the community that had welcomed his immigrant grandparents decades earlier. The report included photographs from Corazón's better days, Christian accepting a James Beard Award nomination for Outstanding Chef, Sofia celebrating her 6th birthday surrounded by restaurant staff who had become her extended family, community fundraisers that had raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for local charities, Thanksgiving dinners that fed anyone who needed a meal, regardless of their ability to pay. Marcus realized he hadn't just destroyed a business, he had dismantled an institution that had made dozens of lives better. Christian's current struggles became more apparent as Marcus continued visiting the cart daily. The chef worked alone except for afternoons when a teenager helped with lunch prep. His hands bore fresh burns and cuts that spoke of equipment held together through determination rather than proper maintenance. His clothes, while clean, showed obvious wear and careful mending. Most telling were the dark circles under his eyes,
evidence of nights spent calculating expenses and mornings that began before dawn to maximize earning potential. Sofia appeared at the cart every day after school, her backpack stuffed with homework and library books. She completed assignments while her father served customers, occasionally helping by refilling napkin dispensers or wiping down surfaces. Marcus observed her interactions with regular customers who had clearly grown fond of her bright smile and careful manners. She spoke 3 languages fluently, switching between English, Spanish, and what sounded like basic Portuguese when serving diverse clientele. The child possessed intelligence that belonged in accelerated programs, not in overcrowded public schools struggling with budget cuts. The breaking point came when Marcus witnessed an incident that crystallized his growing conscience crisis. A health inspector arrived at Christian's cart during the lunch rush, clipboard in hand, an expression suggesting predetermined conclusions. The inspection was thorough and hostile, the official nitpicking details that would never concern anyone genuinely interested in food safety. Christian answered every question with patient professionalism, but Marcus could see stress radiating from his posture like heat from asphalt. The inspector cited violations for minor infractions. The cart's hand-washing station was 6 inches too far from the prep area, according to obscure municipal code. The thermometer placement didn't meet recently updated regulations that Christian clearly hadn't been informed about. The permit displaying was positioned incorrectly, though it had hung in the same spot for months without previous complaint. Each citation carried substantial fines that would drain Christian's meager savings and potentially force him to shut down while addressing bureaucratic requirements. Sofia watched from her homework spot, her young face displaying understanding beyond her years. She'd witnessed this scenario before during Corazón's final months, recognizing the pattern of official harassment designed to exhaust small business owners until compliance became impossible. When the inspector finished writing citations, Sofia approached with carefully controlled anger. "Why are you trying to hurt my dad?" she asked with devastating directness. "He makes good food. He helps people. He never did anything wrong except work hard." The inspector, clearly uncomfortable being challenged by a child, mumbled something about regulations and public safety before retreating to his city vehicle. Christian knelt beside Sofia, explaining that sometimes adults make rules that seem unfair, but they had to follow them anyway. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, an emotion directed at himself and the system he had helped create. He recognized the inspector's tactics because Pacific Dining Corporation employed similar strategies when targeting restaurants for acquisition: anonymous complaints, surprise inspections, citations for violations so technical that compliance required expensive legal consultation. The same playbook that had destroyed Corazón was being deployed against Christian's humble cart, and Marcus knew with sickening certainty who was behind it. Bradley Chen's next report confirmed Marcus's suspicions. Pacific Dining had identified Hope's Kitchen as a potential threat to their breakfast market share in the downtown corridor. The cart's growing popularity was attracting customers who might otherwise visit Pacific Grill locations throughout Colorado. More concerning was Christian's reputation for exceptional food quality, which made their standardized offerings seem inferior by comparison. Bradley recommended implementing their standard containment strategy: regulatory pressure, supplier interference, and strategic complaints designed to force closure or acquisition. The plan was already in motion. Pacific Dining had contacted Rocky Mountain Fresh, Christian's current food distributor, suggesting that continued service to Hope's Kitchen might jeopardize their contract to supply 12 Pacific Grill locations throughout Colorado. The distributor, facing potential loss of their largest account, agreed to terminate Christian's service within 30 days. Without reliable food suppliers, the cart would become unsustainable regardless of customer demand. Marcus sat in his corner office that evening, city lights spreading below him like scattered diamonds, contemplating the machine he had built and the damage it continued inflicting. His empire was worth $800 million, employed 14,000 people across 6 states, and generated profits that exceeded most countries' entire budgets. But those numbers felt hollow when measured against Sofia's question about why adults hurt people who work hard and help others.
Christian remained unaware of the forces gathering against him, focused entirely on daily survival and gradual improvement. He'd saved enough money to repair the cart's refrigeration system and planned to add evening hours serving dinner to late-shift workers at the nearby hospital. His dreams were modest but genuine. A second cart within 2 years, maybe a small restaurant again someday. Definitely college tuition for Sofia, who had already announced her intention to study both business and culinary arts. The disconnect between Christian's hopeful planning and the corporate machinery designed to crush him created a tension that Marcus found increasingly unbearable. Each morning, he arrived at the cart knowing that his company was actively working to destroy the man who served him breakfast with genuine warmth. Christian's smile never wavered, his food quality never declined, and his daughter continued treating every customer like welcome guests despite the uncertainty that defined their daily existence. Marcus Thompson's Mercedes pulled up at exactly 5:30, its engine purring with the quiet confidence of German engineering. But instead of sending his driver to collect the usual order, Marcus stepped out himself for the first time since becoming a regular customer. Christian looked up from arranging fresh salsa containers, his smile automatic and genuine, completely unaware that he was greeting the architect of his professional destruction. "Good morning, sir. The usual breakfast burrito with extra hot sauce and black coffee?" Christian asked, his hands already moving toward the ingredients with practiced efficiency. Marcus stood frozen, studying the face he'd seen in surveillance photos 18 months earlier, noting how the stress of financial ruin had carved new lines around Christian's eyes, but hadn't diminished the warmth in his expression. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice catching slightly, "I wanted to tell you something important. About your restaurant, Corazón." Christian's hands stopped moving, salsa ladles suspended midair as if time had suddenly crystallized around them. The name of his lost restaurant hung in the morning air like smoke from a funeral pyre, bringing back memories he'd carefully buried beneath layers of daily survival and forward momentum. "You knew my restaurant?" Christian asked carefully, his chef's instincts detecting danger the way a sommelier identifies spoiled wine. Something in the stranger's tone carried weight beyond casual conversation, an undercurrent of significance that made Christian's pulse quicken with anticipation and dread. Marcus removed his expensive sunglasses, revealing eyes that carried the burden of wealth acquired through questionable means. "I'm Marcus Thompson, CEO of Pacific Dining Corporation. I'm the man who destroyed your life, and I need you to understand exactly how it happened." The confession hit Christian like physical violence. His legs buckled, forcing him to grip the cart's edge for support, while his mind processed information that redefined everything he thought he understood about his fall from grace. The random health inspections, the supplier problems, the lease violations that had appeared like a coordinated attack. None of it had been coincidence or bad luck. It had been warfare disguised as business. And he had been too naive to recognize the battlefield until after he'd already lost everything. "You destroyed my restaurant on purpose," Christian said, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of accumulated grief and rage. "You took my life's work, my employees' livelihoods, my daughter's stability, and turned it all into profit margins and quarterly reports." Marcus nodded, unable to meet Christian's eyes directly. "Pacific Dining identified Corazón as a threat to our expansion plans. Your restaurant was too successful, too beloved by the community. It made our standardized offerings look inferior by comparison. We couldn't compete with authenticity, so we eliminated it through regulatory manipulation and supplier interference." The explanation continued with clinical precision that made the cruelty even more devastating.
Marcus detailed how Pacific Dining had cultivated relationships with health department officials, offering campaign contributions and consulting contracts in exchange for zealous enforcement of obscure regulations against targeted restaurants. They maintained a network of suppliers who could be pressured to terminate service to competitors through threats of losing larger contracts with Pacific Dining locations. The anonymous food poisoning reports that triggered your closure? Marcus continued, each word feeling like glass in his throat. We generated those through shell companies and fake customer accounts. The health department was required to investigate every complaint, regardless of credibility. We knew the extended closure would bankrupt you before you could prove the reports were fabricated. Christian felt 17 months of careful emotional control, cracking like ice under pressure. The grief he'd processed, the acceptance he'd cultivated, the peace he'd found in rebuilding his life from nothing, all of it based on the belief that his failure had been circumstantial rather than orchestrated. Learning that his daughter's tears, his employees' unemployment, and his own spiral into poverty had been deliberately engineered for corporate profit unleashed fury that threatened to consume his rebuilt sense of purpose. Sofia lost her school, her friends, her sense of security because you wanted to increase market share, Christian said, his voice rising with each word. Roberto, my sous chef, had to move back to Mexico because he couldn't find work that paid enough to support his family. Jenny, my head server, is working 3 part-time jobs without benefits because you decided our restaurant threatened your bottom line. Marcus stepped closer to the cart, his expensive cologne mixing incongruously with the honest smells of cooking food and working man's sweat. I know the damage we caused. I see it every morning when I watch you work twice as hard for a fraction of what you earned before. But I also see something else. You've built something here that's genuine in a way my corporate restaurants never were. Don't you dare, Christian interrupted, his anger finally breaking free like water through a cracked dam. Don't you dare romanticize what you did to us. You don't get to feel better about destroying my life by praising how I survived your attack. This cart exists because you stole everything else. My daughter does homework beside a food truck because you stole her stability and her father's restaurant. The confrontation attracted attention from early morning commuters who had gathered expecting breakfast burritos but found themselves witnessing something far more dramatic. Christian's regular customers formed a protective semicircle around the cart, recognizing that their beloved chef was facing some kind of crisis. Mrs. Patterson, who ordered the same veggie scramble every Tuesday, stepped forward with protective instincts activated. "Is everything all right, Christian?" she asked, her teacher's voice carrying authority.
Accumulated from 30 years of managing unruly students. "This man isn't bothering you, is he?" Other customers murmured agreement, their loyalty to Christian evident in their defensive postures and suspicious glances toward Marcus, whose expensive clothing marked him as an outsider in this community of working people. Marcus realized he stood surrounded by the very thing his corporate strategy had been designed to eliminate: authentic community connections built through consistent service and genuine care. These people weren't just customers purchasing convenient breakfast options. They were neighbors protecting someone they valued, prepared to defend Christian against threats they didn't fully understand but instinctively recognized. "I came here to make things right," Marcus said, addressing both Christian and the gathered crowd. "I owe this man more than money can repay. My company systematically destroyed his restaurant through corruption and manipulation. He lost everything because we saw his success as a threat to our profits." The admission sent ripples through the crowd like stones thrown into still water. Jennifer Walsh, the permit coordinator who had helped Christian navigate bureaucratic obstacles, stepped forward with recognition dawning across her face. "You're the CEO who's been buying up the Arts District, Pacific Dining Corporation. I processed the permits for your company's acquisitions. Every independent restaurant that closed,
Every family business that couldn't survive your regulatory pressure, every community gathering place that got replaced by your chain locations, Jennifer continued, her voice building with administrative authority. You destroyed entire neighborhoods' character for profit, and now you're standing here acting like confession makes it acceptable? Christian looked at the faces surrounding him, these people who had embraced his cart and, by extension, him and Sofia, offering the community support that Corazón had once provided to others. Their anger on his behalf was both touching and empowering, reminding him that he hadn't lost everything when his restaurant closed. He had lost one version of success, but gained something potentially more valuable, the respect and affection of people who valued authenticity over corporate polish. "What do you want from me?" Christian asked Marcus, his voice steady despite the emotional turbulence beneath. "Forgiveness? Absolution? Some kind of redemption story you can tell yourself to sleep better in your penthouse apartment?" The questions hung in the morning air, like challenges thrown down between adversaries who were finally meeting on honest ground. Marcus reached into his briefcase, removing documents that would change everything. "I'm not here for forgiveness," he said quietly. "I'm here to transfer ownership of your original restaurant location back to you. The building, the equipment, everything. No strings attached." Christian stared at the legal papers, his hands trembling as he read terms that seemed impossible. Complete ownership transfer, debt forgiveness, and a $2 million settlement fund for business reconstruction. The crowd around the cart fell silent, sensing the magnitude of what was unfolding before them. "Why?" Christian asked, his voice breaking with emotions he couldn't name. "Why now, after everything you took from us?" Marcus looked at Sofia, who had emerged from behind the cart to stand beside her father. "Because your daughter asked why adults hurt people who work hard and help others. I couldn't answer that question honestly and live with myself anymore." The transformation began immediately. Marcus publicly announced Pacific Dining Corporation's withdrawal from predatory acquisition practices, citing a new commitment to supporting local restaurants rather than destroying them. The announcement sent shockwaves through the industry, with competitors scrambling to understand what they saw as inexplicable corporate suicide. 3 months later, Corazón reopened with a celebration that blocked
traffic for 6 blocks. Christian had rebuilt the restaurant with improvements, adding wheelchair accessibility and a community dining area where anyone could eat regardless of their ability to pay. The original staff returned, including Roberto, who cried when Christian offered him the executive chef position he'd always deserved. Sofia cut the ribbon with oversized scissors, beaming as cameras captured her pride in her father's achievement. The first meal served was to Mrs. Patterson, the teacher who had defended Christian at his cart, followed by every regular customer who had supported Hope's Kitchen during its brief but meaningful existence. Marcus ate alone at table 12, the same spot where Sofia once did homework. Christian approached with a plate he hadn't ordered. "This was my wife's favorite dish," Christian said simply. "She believed food could heal anything, even broken trust." "I don't deserve forgiveness," Marcus replied, accepting the plate with hands that shook slightly. "Maybe not," Christian agreed, "but Sofia deserves to see that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define us forever." 6 months later, Sofia enrolled in a culinary arts program while maintaining her straight-A average in regular school. She spent weekends at Corazón learning advanced techniques from Roberto while serving as the restaurant's youngest food critic. Her reviews, posted on a children's blog Marcus secretly funded, became legendary for their honest assessments and sophisticated palate. Christian established the Maria Martinez Foundation, using Marcus's settlement to provide microloans for immigrant entrepreneurs seeking to open restaurants. The foundation's first recipient was Carlos Mendez, the teenager who had worked at the cart, now preparing to open a small taco stand near his high school.
Marcus quietly dissolved Pacific Dining Corporation's acquisition division, redirecting those resources toward supporting independent restaurants through fair supplier contracts and mentorship programs. His board resisted initially, but profits remained strong while public perception improved dramatically. Food industry publications called it the most significant corporate culture shift in decades. The story concluded 1 year later during Corazón's anniversary. Christian stood before a dining room filled with customers, employees, and community members whose lives had been touched by the restaurant's resurrection. Sofia stood beside him, wearing a chef's coat embroidered with "Future Chef" in script that matched the original Hope's Kitchen cart. This restaurant exists because sometimes the people who hurt us most become the catalysts for our greatest growth, Christian told the gathered crowd. Marcus Thompson destroyed my first dream, but that destruction led to something better, a business built on authentic community rather than just profit. Marcus sat in the back corner, no longer the predatory CEO, but a changed man learning that true wealth couldn't be measured in stock prices or market dominance. He watched Christian's success with genuine pride, knowing that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about choosing different actions for the future. Christian approached Marcus as the evening wound down, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the quiet confidence of someone who had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. "Thank you," he said simply, sitting across from the man who had once been his destroyer but was now something more complex and hopeful. "For what?" Marcus asked. "For showing me that even the worst experiences can lead to the best outcomes, if we're brave enough to forgive and build something new." Outside, the Hope's Kitchen cart sat in the restaurant's parking lot, now serving late-night meals to hospital workers and students. Sofia had convinced her father to keep it running as a reminder that success could take many forms, and that sometimes the smallest dreams carried the greatest power to change lives.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.